I want to tell you something that happened to me about 3 years ago, and I've been carrying it around ever since like a stone in my chest. I gave 40 years of my life to one company. 40 years. I started there when I was 24 years old. I had a full head of dark hair and a cheap suit my mother bought me for the interview. I walked into that building not knowing anything about anything, and I walked out 40 years later knowing everything about that place. Every system, every process, every shortcut, every person's name on every floor. I gave that company my 20s, my 30s, my 40s, my 50s, and the first half of my 60s. I gave them my back, my knees, my sleep, my weekends, my holidays. I missed my daughter's first school play because of a deadline. I missed my son's baseball game because of a meeting that could have been an email. I told myself it was worth it. I told myself I was building something. And then one day it was over, and they replaced me in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. That's what 40 years of loyalty gets you. 14 days. I found out later from a guy I used to manage that they had my replacement picked out before my retirement party. Before the cake. Before the speeches. Before my boss stood up and said Frank has been the backbone of this department for 4 decades. While he was saying that, someone down the hall was already setting up a desk for the 29-year-old kid who was going to sit in my chair the following Monday. They didn't even wait for the chair to get cold. I'm not going to pretend I didn't see it coming on some level. I'm 66, not stupid. I know how companies work. You're a number, you're a function. You're a line item on a budget, and the second that line item can be replaced with a cheaper one, you're gone. I know that. But knowing it in your head and feeling it in your gut are two very different things. Because even though I knew the truth, I had spent 40 years telling myself a different story. I told myself I mattered there, that what I did meant something, that the relationships I built were real, that the people I mentored and trained and covered for and stayed late with and ate lunch with every single day for decades, that those people would remember me, that I would leave a mark. And the truth is, I did leave a mark. For about a week. And then the mark got painted over and someone else's name went on the door, and life went on as if I had never been there at all. The day I cleaned out my desk was the loneliest day of my life, and I've had some lonely days. I had a cardboard box and 40 years of stuff to put in it. Photos, a coffee mug my daughter made me in 4th grade, a little trophy from the company softball league in '93, a letter from a client thanking me for going above and beyond on a project I barely remembered. I stood there looking at all of it, and I thought, this is it. This is what 40 years fits into, a box you can carry with one hand. I walked through the hallway, and a few people said goodbye. A few people said good luck. Most people didn't look up from their screens. Not because they're bad people, because they were busy. Because they had their own deadlines and their own meetings and their own lives. And I was already yesterday's news. I got to the parking lot and I sat in my car, and I didn't start it for a long time. I just sat there holding that box on my lap like it was a baby. And I thought about the first day I pulled into that same parking lot 40 years ago. How nervous I was, how excited, how I sat in my car that day too, just for a minute, taking a breath before walking in. And now here I was, sitting in the same parking lot, same car essentially, bookending the whole thing. Except the first time I was sitting there because my life was about to begin. And this time I was sitting there because it felt like it was over. My wife had made a nice dinner that night. She put out candles. She opened a bottle of wine. She was trying to make it feel like a celebration. And I appreciated that, I really did. But I couldn't celebrate. I sat there pushing food around my plate, and she kept saying, "You should be proud, Frank, 40 years, that's incredible." And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "What's wrong?" And I said nothing, because how do you explain to someone that the thing you gave your entire adult life to just shrugged and moved on without you? How do you explain that the building you walked into every single day for 14,600 days just closed the door behind you and didn't look back? You can't. So you say nothing, and you eat your dinner, and you go to bed early, and you stare at the ceiling. The weeks after that were strange. I kept waking up at 5:30. 40 years of alarms had built a clock inside me that I couldn't turn off. I'd wake up, and for a split second I'd think I need to get ready. And then I'd remember. And that remembering, that moment every single morning where reality catches up to you, that was the worst part of my day. Every day. For months. Just that 3-second window where the world resets and reminds you that nobody needs you to be anywhere. I'd make coffee and sit at the kitchen table and look out the window and watch the neighbors leave for work. Cars backing out of driveways. People in suits carrying briefcases. The whole machine of the working world humming along. And I was just watching it from the other side of the glass. Like a kid looking into a toy store after it's closed. I could see everything, but I couldn't be part of it anymore. About a month after I left, I drove past the building. I don't know why. Curiosity, maybe. Or masochism. I drove slowly through the parking lot and I looked up at the window that used to be my office. The light was on. Somebody was in there. Somebody was sitting at what used to be my desk, looking at what used to be my computer, doing what used to be my job. And the building looked exactly the same. The same brick, the same sign out front, the same flag on the pole. Nothing had changed. The only thing missing was me. And the building didn't seem to mind. I ran into my old boss at the hardware store a few months later. Nice guy. We worked together for 15 years. He shook my hand and said, "Frank, how's retirement treating you?" And I said, "Great." And he said, "Good, good, you earned it." And then he said, "Well, I better get going. Take care of yourself." And that was it. 15 years of working side by side, and that was the conversation. 45 seconds in aisle 9 between the power drills and the sandpaper. And I stood there after he walked away and I thought, this is what I am now. A 45-second conversation in a hardware store. That's my relationship with the place that defined my entire adult life. You want to know what really stings? I trained the kid who replaced me. Not directly, but close enough. He was on my team for about 2 years before I left. Young guy, smart, ambitious. Reminded me of myself at that age, actually, which made it worse. I showed him the systems. I walked him through the processes. I introduced him to the clients. I sat with him in my office for hours explaining things that took me decades to learn, and I just handed them to him in an afternoon. Because that's what good leaders do, right? You pass it on. You prepare the next generation. You make sure the work continues after you're gone. And I did all of that. Gladly. Proudly. And he took everything I gave him and he used it to step right into my shoes before they were even cold. I don't blame him. He was doing what anyone would do. But there's something about training your own replacement that eats at you in a way that's hard to describe. It's like digging your own grave and being told you should feel good about it because at least the hole is well made. There was a retirement dinner. About 30 people showed up. They had it at a restaurant downtown, the Italian place we always went to for holiday parties. My boss gave a speech. A few of the senior guys said some words. They gave me a plaque, one of those wooden plaques with a little gold plate that says, "In recognition of 40 years of dedicated service." I've got it in my garage now. It's sitting on the workbench next to a broken drill and a can of paint thinner. 40 years of dedicated service sitting between a broken tool and a chemical. That feels about right somehow. During the dinner, people told stories about me. Funny ones, mostly. Remember when Frank did this? Remember when Frank said that? And everyone laughed, and I laughed too. And for about 2 hours it felt like I mattered, like all of it had been real. But then the check came and people started putting on their coats, and the hugs got shorter and the goodbyes got quicker, and one by one they walked out to their cars and drove back to their lives. And I stood in the parking lot of that restaurant and I knew. I knew that was the last time most of those people would ever think about me. The guys I used to manage, the ones I trained, the ones I went to bat for when they screwed up, the ones I wrote recommendations for, the ones I stayed late to help when they were drowning. Most of them haven't called. A few sent texts in the first week. Nice messages. "We'll miss you, Frank. Let's grab lunch sometime." You know how that goes. Sometime means never. Let's grab lunch means I'll think about you when I see your name in my contacts, and then I'll keep scrolling. I'm not bitter about it. Okay, maybe I'm a little bitter. But mostly I'm just surprised at how fast 40 years of relationships can evaporate. Like steam off a sidewalk after rain. There 1 second, gone the next. My wife says I talk about it too much. She says, "Frank, you need to let it go. It's over. Move on. Find something new." And she's right. I know she's right. but she doesn't understand what it feels like to give the best years of your life to something and have it mean nothing. She raised our kids, and our kids still call her. She put love into her family, and her family loves her back. She invested in people who invested in her. I invested in a company. And a company is not a person. A company doesn't remember you. A company doesn't miss you. A company is a machine, and you're a part. And when the part wears out, they put in a new one, and the machine keeps running. I just wish someone had told me that when I was 24. I wish someone had grabbed me in that parking lot on my first day and said, "Frank, give them your work, but don't give them your identity. Because one day they're going to take the work away, and if you've given them your identity too, you'll have nothing left." That's the thing I keep coming back to. I don't know who I am without that job. I was a manager. I was a leader. I was the guy who fixed things when they broke. I was the guy people came to for answers. That was my whole identity for 40 years. Frank from work. Frank who runs the department. Frank who knows how everything works. And now I'm just Frank. And just Frank doesn't know what to do with himself. People ask me at parties. They say, "So Frank, what do you do?" And I say, "I'm retired." And they say, "Oh, that's great. What did you do?" And I tell them, and they nod and say, "Wow, 40 years, that's impressive." And then they move on to someone else. Someone who still does something. Someone who still has an answer to that question that isn't past tense. And I stand there holding my drink, thinking I used to be someone you'd want to talk to. I used to have stories from work that would hold a room. Now my most exciting story is about the bird that keeps landing on my porch railing every morning. That's what my life has been reduced to. A bird on a railing. I tried to replace it, I really did. I volunteered at the food bank for a while. I joined a men's group at the church. I even looked into consulting, thinking maybe I could use all that experience for something. But none of it felt the same. None of it gave me that feeling of walking into a building and knowing I belonged there. Knowing I was needed there. Knowing that if I didn't show up, things wouldn't work as well. That feeling is addictive, and when it's gone, everything else feels like a substitute. Like decaf. It looks the same, but you know it's not. My son told me something last year that stuck with me. He said, "Dad, you didn't lose a job, you lost a purpose." And I thought about that for a long time. He's right. It was never about the money. It was never about the title. It was about waking up every morning and knowing why. Knowing what I was for. And now the alarm doesn't go off, and nobody's waiting for me, and nothing depends on whether I show up or not. And that absence of purpose, that vacuum where meaning used to be, it's heavier than any workload I ever carried. I would take the stress back in a heartbeat. I would take the deadlines and the late nights and the impossible bosses and the budget cuts and all of it. Because at least when I had all of that, I knew who I was. I knew why I was getting out of bed. I knew my name meant something to someone somewhere, even if that somewhere was just a building on a highway that I'll probably never set foot in again. I drove past it one more time last week. I didn't mean to. I was on my way to the grocery store and I took a wrong turn. Or maybe it wasn't a wrong turn. Maybe something in me still orbits that place like a planet that lost its sun but keeps spinning anyway. The parking lot was full. The lights were on. People were walking in with their coffee cups and their badges and their purpose. And I slowed down just for a second, just long enough to look up at that window one more time. The light was on. Someone was in there. And the building didn't know I was outside. And the building didn't care. I went home and I sat in my chair and my wife asked me if I was okay and I said, "Yeah, I'm fine." And she looked at me the way she always looks at me now, with that mix of love and worry that I can't stand because I know I'm the reason for both. And I thought about calling one of the guys from work, just to talk, just to hear a voice that knows the same hallways I know. But I didn't, because I was afraid of the 45-second conversation, afraid of the "how's retirement treating you?" Afraid of the "well, I better get going," so I'm saying it here instead. To whoever is listening, I gave 40 years to a place that forgot me, and I'm 66 years old and I still don't know how to live with that. I don't know if I ever will. But I know I'm not the only one. I know there are men and women sitting in their kitchens right now feeling the exact same thing, staring at the exact same ceiling, carrying the exact same box of memories that nobody else cares about. And if that's you, I want you to know that what you're feeling is real, that 40 years meant something even if the building doesn't remember. It meant something to you. And maybe that has to be enough. Maybe at 66, that's the lesson, that the only person who needs to remember what you did is you. I'm still working on believing that. Some days are better than others, but I'm trying.